New Hampshire panel adopts changes to marijuana legalization bill with full committee vote expected on Tuesday. And bear with me for just 1 second here. I misspoke. I meant Pennsylvania. My bad. Pennsylvania. Harrisburg, legalized marijuana in Pennsylvania has the potential to bring in more than $1 billion in tax revenue over the next 5 years, according to a new report by the Independent Fiscal Office. The study shows if legalized this year, legalized marijuana could generate $41 million in general fund revenue in 24 through 25. That number increases to $185 million in 25-26 and surpasses $250 million every year after 2026, according to the study. The IFO studies assumes legalized marijuana sales would begin in January 25 if Governor Josh Shapiro's proposal is passed by the split legislature. We're losing out on an industry that, once fully implemented, would bring in more than $250 million in annual revenue, said Shapiro during his February budget address. And our failure to legalize and regulate this only fuels the black market and drains much-needed resources for law enforcement. It's time to catch up. Currently, 5 of the 6 states bordering Pennsylvania have some form of legalized marijuana, whether for adult or medical use. Pennsylvania legalized medical marijuana in 2016 under Governor Tom Wolf. However, the full adult use cannabis remains stuck in the legislature. Pennsylvania lawmakers also pushed last year for new marijuana legislation, including a bill from Senator Sharif Street, D. Philadelphia, and Senator Camara Bartolotta. I'm sorry, I butchered your last name. From a Republican from Beaver Green, Washington, to decriminalize marijuana. The IFL's report notes banking challenges cannabis companies could face because marijuana remains a Schedule I substance under the Federal Controlled Substance Act. Also highlighted in the report is the potential impact of regulating and taxing games of skill, electronic games often found in bars and gas stations. Governor Shapiro has proposed a 42% tax on the games. I think it's time for a solution, said Shapiro, on the games of skill. We can't do away with them. We should regulate them in tax. All right. So this is really why I picked this article, was because one of the ways in which newer markets get green-lighted is this notion that there's going to be this massive tax windfall. And that's not wrong. But what I've been saying for a long time here on this show, and anybody who would listen to me, is what is the cost of levying taxes that tend to be so burdensome that businesses go out of operation? It creates a lack of profitability in the industry, and it often supports the unregulated market. And while I'm excited about Pennsylvania joining the adult use world, I am concerned that they are leading with the tax benefits, because that $250 million per year that they're talking about gets taken out of the pockets of cannabis entrepreneurs who ultimately are going to pass along those expenses to cannabis patients and customers. The other thing that I thought was really telling about this article was that in the same article, they're talking about the governor's proposal for basically taxing video games in bars. And this governor, God bless him, wants to tax those video games at 42%. I think any politician who allows the number 42% to come out of their mouth when they're talking about taxing anything should probably have a muzzle and go back to the drawing board. But again, this is Yaro Kubrin, High at 9 News. I'd like to know what my other guests think.
This is all speculation on top of speculation. And if they think that they're going to be bringing in $1 billion, then, to the legislatures, you have to also be thinking that currently, because you guys have been so hard-nosed to get any form of adult use sales going on, that you have been losing $1 billion for the last 10 years.
That presupposes that prohibition was not a revenue-producing activity. And if you look at the fiscal impacts of prohibition, we need to see where those economic winners and losers existed as a result of that that paradigm. And so
private prisons made a lot of money.
we just touched upon the prisons in another state, the $90,000 a year that goes to a private company to house these inmates. So I think it's important that when we look at the cost of prohibition, Jason, you've been trained to look at both the societal costs and the fiscal cost of prohibition. There has been fiscal gains as a result of prohibition, just not to you or your constituents.
Oh, I already know that, because I've had plenty of losses over the years, so I totally know that those all go into the gains category, and that's just from me, not alone all the stories that I know about. And then if you compound that by the size of the population, then it's astronomical numbers that they get in free revenue through forfeiture. It's insane.
Insane.
Yes, not to mention when they resell everything too.
Well, apparently they can't do that very well because they had a bong auction and they barely covered the cost of electricity.
I wasn't talking about selling those things back.
I think they're mad about the the bordering states that are all selling cannabis, and all of their citizens are going and spending money there instead of keeping that money in the state.
So true. And the governor touched on it. They're surrounded by states that are participating and getting the benefits of participating, and they're not. I think their citizens are just crossing state lines.
I think if I'm thinking of the map in all of their surrounding states, they were the first one to go medical in all of the states that they're adjacent to.